Hello and welcome everyone back to the Freemelon Society. Thank you very, very much for joining me here today. My name is Eli Martyr, and today we are going to be doing part 2 of a series I started quite a while back. So this video has been a long time coming. But this is viruses and bacteria are normal, natural, and necessary. So if you haven't seen part 1, make sure to check that out. And in part 2, we're going to be expanding on what we learned in part 1. This topic is, in my opinion, critically important. Since the inception of modern medicine, the world has been taken down a path of fear of the environment and fear of the unknown microbial world that is not based in any kind of scientific proof or truth, and has served as a justification to enable the allopathic medical industry, cultivating in the public an undeserved faith in the medical industry, and has allowed them to sell for untold amounts of money, exorbitant amounts of money, pharmacological treatments and cures and poisons that destroy the body, and that have been destroying human health for many years now. And for some reason, we still haven't seen through the lie. If you watch the first part of this series, and then you continue on to watch this part of the series, then by the end, you will have what you need to be completely unaffected by the lies of the world, and you will have a rational answer for all the different types of phenomena that we see expressing in the world around us in relation to what causes health and disease, conditions of all sorts. I urge you to pay attention on this one. I spent a lot of time making this slideshow presentation for you because, as with many of my videos, I like to make my videos ageless. What I'm going to go into today, and what I went into in part 1 of this series, these topics will not age. They will be forever important. They will be as important to humans 150 years from now, 500 years from now, as they are today, as they should have been and would have been 500 years ago. Because here we're dealing with truths of nature that do not change, that apply to all life, principles of life that govern the dynamics of creation, of energy. These things are so important, and so that's what we're going to be getting into today. So I really hope you appreciate this. I don't have much to offer you save for the type of content that I'm giving. I've got a just absolutely terrible camera setup here. I don't have any dashingly charming good looks to fool you into believing what I'm saying. I'm hoping to just give it to you raw, and that the truth is compelling enough and that resonates deeply enough with you that you investigate yourself and then very quickly come to a reasonable and truthful understanding about how to preserve your health and wellness and how to have perfect immunity and what compromises immunity for real and not what we are told in the mainstream that do nothing but destroy your health. So let's get into this. This is part 2 of viruses and bacteria are normal, natural, and necessary. All right, let's go, guys. So in part 1, we went over a lot of different things. We basically covered the general plan that nature is doing when she expresses illness and disease in an organism. Okay, we used a lot of analogies from the forest and the trees. We also used human analogies to show that viruses and bacteria are part and parcel of all healthy organisms, and that they are simply agents of cleanup that get kicked into motion when there's a sufficient level of environmental toxicity or metabolic toxicity built up in the system. And if there's enough of a buildup of toxic matter, then those viruses and bacteria are produced by the body in order to get rid of that material. And in getting rid of that material, what you on the surface experience are the disease symptoms. So if you have a corruption of lung tissue by either breathing in bad air or by smoking, then your body will rebel against that silly behavior and it will create a lung purging disease, a flu, a pneumonia, a cold, whatever it is. Okay? So in part 1, we went into this. So in this part, what we want to get into is how contagion actually works. So when we see or seem to see other people getting sick because we think that they've contracted something from a sick person, what is really happening. So that's what we kind of want to target today. And of course, we have to bring up some context as well. So that's going to be the focus of this lecture. Okay, let's just start off with the bold statement. Viral transmission is impossible. Okay? Viral transmission is impossible. Viruses are created by our own bodies and tissues in order to clean up and eliminate waste products from the body. Viruses and bacteria are only created from the body cells in response to toxic and acidic conditions that require their services to eliminate. If no such vital offenses are present in an organism, then no symptom causing viruses and bacteria are formed. If a healthy host is subjected somehow to a load of naturally occurring foreign viruses or bacteria from another unhealthy host, nothing happens. The healthy host does not become sick. There exists a cycle of morphology in the microbial world, where microbes can change their structure to adapt to the peculiar and fluctuating type of toxic waste that needs to be eliminated in the body. Okay, so in this slide, what we've got here, see at the bottom, I've got first line of defense, are the living microbes, okay? I'm going to use war analogies a couple of times in this lecture, maybe. I don't know if I am. I'm just getting ready if I do. It's almost the wrong analogy to use because there is no war going on in your system. There is no war. This is an inheritance from a depraved culture where they try to make you think that you're always at war 24/7 because war is scary. And they like fear because it allows you to be completely controlled and it makes you shut off your rational thinking brain and be subjected to propaganda. You're a more likely candidate to consume propaganda without question if you're in a state of fear. Anyway, so that being said, I've got here first line of defense is the living microbes. Okay, so what does that mean? Let's just say I read too many stupid mainstream articles and I come across an article that tells me a little bit of red wine is good for you every day. Eventually, I get enough poisons built up in my system. Now, the first thing that would happen is that your body, if it comes time where those poisons are built up to a level where it's too much for the body to handle, then it'll release the first line of defense. It'll release living microbes in order to consume those acid poisons from the body, break them down, and then shuttle them off for elimination. Okay? So the first types of agents that your body will recruit in order to deal with toxins that you put in there are the living cells. So when defending the body from toxic waste, living cells are called into action first. If waste is too toxic for living cells to handle, which are the bacteria, the fungi, and the yeast. Okay, so those are the three of the living organisms that your body will recruit first. Then the body calls for non-living reinforcements, viruses. Think of drones or robots or androids. So let's say the toxic waste buildup in the body is so toxic that the living microbes, the first line of defense, the bacteria, the fungi, and the yeast, they can't even handle it. It's too toxic for even them. What they do is they say, okay, whoa, let's back up a bit, right? Call in the robots, call in the androids, call in the drones. Get the non-living agents to deal with this because it's too difficult for us to deal with. You know, the first line of defense are the microbes. If the toxins are too tough to handle, then you call in the T-800s, you call in the drones, right? We want to go out into outer space and then do a bunch of stuff. But the threat of the environment is too much for us to handle. So what do? We send in the drones. Unmanned robotic spacecrafts or whatever. Now with modern technology, you know, instead of going to war and sending in the living troopers to go invade a country or do whatever damage our corrupt politicians want. Let's say you're some demon like, Barack Obama, and you want to go and bomb the hell out of the Middle East without any human casualties. What do? You send in the drones. And the guy actually talks about this with pleasure. Friggin' demons running this planet. Anyhow, you send in the drones, okay? Non-living structures to go and deal with the problem. When a virus is created by the body, it is created in that body and that body only. Thus, it can only be programmed with genetic information from that same body. The genetic instructions, RNA and DNA, act as programs for the viral drone to specifically eliminate only invaders in the host's body. Now, the drone has no programming to do anything else or act in another host's body. So we know that viruses and bacteria are produced inside the body. Okay, we're on the same page. You guys are following me. Thus, since the virus is created by the host's body, the only genetic information that it can be programmed with is the genetic information of the host. This makes sense. It couldn't be anything otherwise. If a virus is produced by my own body, there is no way that it has also produced instructions to detoxify a camel's spleen. That can't be, because the virus came from me. So what does that mean for us? It means that every single virus and bacteria that is working in your body, which was produced by your own body, can only function in your body. It cannot function in any other host in the entire universe. Why? Because it simply doesn't have the instructions to do that. You're not going to have a program that is designed for the Apple operating system work on a PC operating system. Okay? Yes, I know that you can have programs that run cross-platform, but that's because they were specifically programmed. Okay? If there is a program that is specifically designed for an Apple operating system, that particular program will not be able to run in a different operating system. And that's how it works in life. Okay, so in this slide, you guys know me by now. I'm a professional stuntman. I have a tendency for the dramatic and overly dramatic, as you can probably tell. This is definitely my favorite slide in this presentation. That's what a virus does. See, this is a complete reversal of what we are told in the literature. What we are told in the scientific literature, medical literature, is that it should be our antibodies that are blowing away the virus. And that is not how it works. It is the virus itself. Virus means poison in Latin. So it's a misnomer to begin with, but I'm going to use the term because that's what we're all familiar with. But whenever we say virus, we're not talking about anything bad. It's the virus that is blowing away foreign material. That's how nature has designed it. Okay? So, here in this slide, I'm saying, if you remember anything from this lecture, remember this page. Okay? That's why I made it as dramatic as possible. Okay? Robots cannot act unless they are given a specific program. The robot cannot do what is not in its programming to do. Okay, now, viral and bacterial infection is proved invalid, even according to the established standards of medical practice. Okay? Now, Robert Koch, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Koch, Robert Penis. So I'm going to go with Robert Koch. Robert Koch was a German physician and microbiologist. He is famous for coming up with Koch's postulates. Now, these are 4 criteria to scientifically prove that a certain disease is caused by a specific microorganism. So Robert Koch was alive from 1843 to 1910, and he was credited with many scientific discoveries in terms of virology and disease and whatnot. Now, his specific postulates, okay, so these are criteria that have to exist if a microbe is the cause of a disease. So the first criteria is the microorganism must be found in abundance in all organisms suffering from the disease, but should not be found in healthy organisms. Okay, so that's the first one. Second, the microorganism must be isolated from a disease organism and grown in pure culture. Pure culture meaning just basically a petri dish or an isolated collection of living cells, okay, that are supported by an environment, usually a synthetic environment if we're talking about lab experiments. But so that's what they mean by culture. The cultured microorganism should cause disease. This is number 3. The cultured microorganism should cause disease when introduced into a healthy organism. And the last criteria is that the microorganism must be re-isolated from the inoculated, diseased experimental host and identified as being identical to the original specific causative agent. Okay? So these are the 4 criteria that must be extant, right? If a microorganism is going to be proved to be the cause of disease. If any of these requirements are not satisfied, then the microorganism cannot be the cause of the disease, and some other factor is present that has not been accounted for. As the theory that germs cause disease was burgeoning through the 18th and 19th century, problems arose when observations of life violated Koch's postulates. Oh no. When what we observe violates what we theorize, what do? Well, obviously, for humans, we do whatever the hell we can to ignore the observations and force our theories into the literature. Go figure. This is what money and power does to you, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so a reminder. Postulate number 1 is that microorganisms must be found in abundance in all organisms suffering from the disease, but they should not be found in healthy organisms. Okay? This is common sense. If we're talking about AIDS, which we'll get to eventually here, and HIV is supposed to be the cause of AIDS, then the HIV virus must be found in every single person suffering from AIDS, and it must not be found in anybody not suffering from AIDS. Okay? Now, if there's an exception to that, then the HIV virus cannot be the cause of AIDS. Now, the reality of the world contradicted the germ theory via the following. The germ theory being that germs are the cause of disease. So it contradicted the germ theory via the following. People with the bacteria could be well. And B, people with the disease supposed to be caused by the infectious bacteria showed no trace of the microbe in their blood or tissue. Well, that's a big problem, right? How the heck can the microbe be the cause of disease if people suffering from the disease don't have the microbe in their tissues? And on the flip side, how could people with the microbe that's said to cause disease be perfectly well? So on both sides of the equation, you've got this contradiction in the theory. And yet the medical community will just, to this day, is still trying to convince you of this theory, even though it was never demonstrated to be true at the birth into microbiology and virology. The medical community countered these blatant contradictions by creating silly explanations, such as asymptomatic carriers, which are disease harborers. Now, of course, this explanation holds just as little water, for how can one be a carrier of a disease-causing bacteria and not have the disease expression? And no, dormancy does not satisfy this problem. So basically what's being said here is that the medical community, knowing that they've got these problems with their own theory, they came up with other silly things like, oh, you can be an asymptomatic carrier, meaning you can carry the microbe in your body, right? And it's just sitting there waiting to do, I don't know what it's waiting to do. It's just at some random time. Then all of a sudden it says, blah, and just springs to life, and it causes you all sorts of trouble. And then it goes back into hiding and sleeping. Okay. This is not what is actually happening under the skin. Okay. When we see this playing out in the world, because what we do also find is people who have the supposed disease causing microbe in their body, but they never display symptoms. They never get sick. Ever. So, if the microbe is the cause of, and again, we're going to be a broken record here because I'm going to drill this into everyone's mind, right? So that you cannot forget this. You can't be a carrier of an infectious disease, of a disease-causing microbe, if it's not causing a disease, right? You see how that works? It can't possibly be the cause. Something else must be happening, must be the case. Okay. So we are going to read a little excerpt from this absolutely massive book, What Really Makes You Ill, by Don Lester and David Parker. So continuing on with this viral transmission is impossible, we're going to take a little section on Staphylococcus. One alleged pathogen, quote-unquote pathogen, that falls into the category of those that are said to produce asymptomatic carriers is the common bacterium called Staphylococcus. It is widely reported that a staph infection causes illness. It is nevertheless acknowledged that this bacterium can be found on the skin of healthy people. This anomalous situation fails Koch's first postulate. The bacterium cannot therefore be regarded as a pathogen. The significance of this bacterium is further discussed in the next section because it is claimed to be a superbug, quote-unquote superbug, that causes a serious MRSA infection. Another example that demonstrates the fallacy of the claim that specific bacteria cause specific diseases, or any disease at all, is that of Dr. Max Pettenkofer, MD, who Eleanor McBean reports to have swallowed on more than one occasion the contents of a glass containing millions of cholera bacilli in full view of a class of his students. Yet, it is reliably reported that Dr. Pettenkofer failed to succumb to the disease. Why did Pettenkofer not succumb to the disease? Because viruses and bacteria are not the cause of disease. 2 points for you if you recognized in this slide that there's a random goat sitting in the bottom right corner that has absolutely nothing to do with this lecture. I'm going to read to you another section from another book called Virus Mania by Etienne de Harven and Joachim Mutter. Mutter, I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name. Let's just go with Mutter. Both MDs. And they've written in this book, again, just loads of great information on how all of this works. Here's a good section that I think you guys need to hear. At this point, we encourage our readers to verify dominant virus theories independently, as many people have done, among them Nobel laureates, top microbiologists, and researchers from other fields, serious journalists, and laypeople alike. We've asked for evidence from important institutions like the World Health Organization, the American Center for Disease Control, and its German counterpart, the Robert Koch Institute, RKI, in Berlin. Now, in the summer of 2005, for example, we contacted the Robert Koch Institute and requested the following information, okay? So we've got these MDs that have reached out to health institutions and requested the following information. Number 1, please name the studies that indisputably show that the SARS, hepatitis C, Ebola, smallpox, and polioviruses and the BSE causative agent have been proven to exist. Number 2, please name studies that indisputably show that the virus named above cause disease, bracket, and also that other factors like malnutrition, toxins, etc. do not at least co-determine the cause of disease. Number 3, please name at least 2 studies that indisputably show that vaccinations are effective and active. Unfortunately, to date, we have not, despite repeat questioning, yet had a single study named to us. So yeah, this isn't just me blowing smoke up your butt. Professionals from the turn of the 20th century have been routinely denied exposure to the public, have had their studies routinely ignored. They've been omitted from scientific debate, and it makes the truth harder to come by in these days, but it's not because of any lack of effort by well-meaning and informed professionals all throughout history.
The Robert Koch Institute, which is the German equivalent of the CDC, was asked, do you have any paper showing the isolation, the pictures of SARS-CoV-2? Quote, the public relations director, quote, I am not aware of a paper which purified isolated SARS-CoV-2. Not one paper.
Okay, let's move on here. So, in this next section, we're going to cover why is it that we believe in contagion, okay? The first major reason why we believe in contagion of viruses is surprisingly simple. The mainstream media flat out lies to you. Okay, look, I know that sounds like a very uneducated dismissal of a large body of work. I get it. I know. But it's surprisingly, sometimes the answers to complex questions are pretty shockingly simple. Were the truth to be revealed and understood that viruses and bacteria are neither contagious nor the cause of disease, the entire foundation upon which medicine relies to justify the necessity of profit-generating vaccines and pills would vanish. So you have to ask yourself, if I am making $10,000 a pop, let's say on some sort of cancer radiation treatment, do you think it would be in my best interest to let the public know that the same type and power of radiation that's used in the treatment is the same type and power of radiation that creates cancer in healthy people? Why the f*** would I do that? The world flat out lies to you. I don't know how to put it in any simpler terms. Now, we'll go through some stuff here, but that's one of the major reasons. It's just that there's no incentive to tell you the truth. Why would they tell you the truth when it compromises massive, massive financial gain and unbelievable and untold amounts of power over populations? Why would they do that?
Here, I'm going to make a statement, which I hope, maybe, that you say to yourself when you hear it, are you kidding me? This cannot be true. The statement is, since the electron microscope was discovered, invented in the 30s, which is the only way, right? The only way you can see a virus. There is not one reported case in 90 years in any medical journal, in any article ever published, of a particle that would be described as a virus being found in any fluid of any sick animal or human being. Did you get that? Not once has anything like this uniform particle been found in any fluid, snot, lung fluid, cerebrospinal fluid, blood, toenail juice, nothing from anybody who's sick. Now, if you don't believe that, let me tell you the people who agree with me on that. I've been looking at the medical literature for 30 years trying to find such a case. There isn't one.
So I'm going to read to you a little clip from an article. In June 1992, the first issue of a newsletter called Rethinking AIDS was released. Rethinking AIDS is an occasional publication of the Group for the Scientific Reprisal of the HIV and AIDS Hypothesis. Okay. So here's a clip from the article. The Centers for Disease Control has had 3 major programs through which it can make diseases appear infectious and make everyone step in line to agree. I almost want to stop right there and just tell you, rewind that little sentence and listen to it again. Okay. Make everyone step in line to agree. Does that sound like people that have your best interest in mind? Or does that sound like a bunch of psychopaths and monsters? Okay, continuing on, to make everyone step in line to agree. One is that in the early 1950s, they formed a special unit, an elite, semi-secret unit that is now almost fully secret, called the Epidemic Intelligence Service, or the EIS. New graduates of medical schools, or biological graduate schools, or perhaps dental schools, or a few other things, public health departments are recruited upon graduation to take a several-week course, and then dispatched on 2-year active assignment, paid by the CDC in various local and state health departments to become the eyes and ears of the CDC, an invisible intelligence network that watches for the tiniest clusters of disease, and when the CDC deems appropriate, turns them into national emergencies. We saw this kind of cynical manipulation in the 1957 Asian flu epidemic. We saw it in the 1960s with the clusters of leukemia, which they tried to make appear infectious. We saw that with the swine flu epidemic that never materialized in 1976 and with the Legionnaires epidemic that same year. And we've seen it more recently with Lyme disease, with hantavirus pneumonia, and just one thing after another. What we have is the CDC, an organization that ostensibly is concerned with the health and wellness of human populations. They have a secret, covert, shadow group that infiltrates different agencies across the world, looks for tiny little clusters and pockets of people getting sick from some sort of pollution, some sort of environmental pollution, some sort of malnutrition, whatever that the cause is, And that secret network fashions that into something that they can make profitable. That's what I just read to you here. Even after, okay, so continuing on, even after those 2 years, every member of the EIS becomes part of a permanent reserve officer corps for the CDC that could be called up in a case of national emergency or time of war to serve as officers of their respective ranks with actual emergency powers. Today, many of these people, by sitting in foundations, major companies, the news media, Surgeon General's office, and other key positions politically, act as silent advocates for the CDC, echoing the CDC's viewpoint whenever it needs support. So, of course, that's a very influential network. And I might add that as of about 1 year ago, because of too many outside requests for the membership directory of the EIS, the CDC has recently suppressed the availability of this directory. They no longer want people knowing what the membership is. That's from Rethinking AIDS newsletter by Brian Ellison. That is what I call pretty goddamn unbelievable. So the first reason why we believe in the contagion myth is because they goddamn lie to you. That's it. The second major reason we believe in contagion is because the method of experimentation is flawed and results are misinterpreted. Okay, so Dr. Harold Hillman, a PhD scientist from London University with a doctorate in biochemistry, had this to say from one of his papers entitled Cell Biology at the Beginning of the 21st Century is in Dire Straits. When a tissue is prepared for histology, histochemistry, electron microscopy, or immunochemistry, an animal is killed. The tissue is excised, it is fixed or frozen, it is embedded, it is sectioned, it is rehydrated, it is stained, it is mounted, it is radiated by light, or bombarded by electron beams. Okay? That is pretty much a standard process for preparing any type of tissue sample in virology or microbiology. All right? Now, the point we're going to come to eventually is that this process that is necessary in order to examine things in the microbial world, these cause massive changes, massive disruptions, massive toxification of the tissue. So you'll never be studying something that is tantamount to how it would be in real life. So in the way we test, we always corrupt our tissue and thus always corrupt the results of the experiment. The major problem in microbiology testing is that the tissue being examined is dead. Hillman believed that the sciences had an unacceptable lack of recognition regarding the effects that such destructive preparation has on the samples. Such procedures produce all sorts of artifacts, debris, and products of the process not natural to life in any real conditions. Even when living samples are used, in brackets, dark field microscopy, for example, the sample is extracted from its normal environment and can't possibly behave in a way applicable to when it is connected with its proper intact living system. So, just to drive it home, understand that anytime they do this type of testing, the examination is always limited by the process of examination itself, which is toxic, which is destructive to the tissue, and thus you will always get a result that has not much to do with reality. So the first reason why we believe in contagion is because authority figures are demons and they lie to you. The second reason why we believe in contagion is because the method of experimentation gives us just false data that is interpreted in such a way that makes you believe that viruses and bacteria are the causes of disease. Okay, so it's because of faulty experimentation. And so they just interpret it in whatever way they see fit.
The study of viruses is flawed by nature. In order for them to be observed in laboratories, viruses must be cauterized and taken and dried. This is called irradiation. This also takes the moisture content out of the virus. Viruses are observed in petri dish environments that are sterilized. Toxic serums are used to keep the cellular activity alive but not healthy. Cells in such an environment do not have at their disposal the full range of microbial cleansing agents as it would appear in the human body. Therefore, scientists will always observe the prominence of viral activity because cells must use viruses to cleanse themselves in such a toxic environment. They do not have bacteria or parasites which they can call upon to consume and eliminate this toxicity. Therefore, scientists observe that viruses dissolve their own cellular activity. But this is an illusion. In order to observe viruses, viruses must be stained, which causes inaccurate observations of the virus, since the virus is not acting in a natural way as it would in the human body. Viruses are so small they are the size of 0.1 microns. Optical microscopes must require the staining process of viruses in order to show up on the microscope. So, what does the virus behave like in the human body? The only way we will know that is if we view it within the living tissue.
The third major reason that we believe in contagion is that most of the environmental influences are beyond our perception. So here I've got a picture of C.W. Leadbeater. And C.W. Leadbeater is someone I've mentioned many times in the past, who was an occultist, esoteric Freemason, who had incredible powers to observe and to respond to and recognize the etheric world. He had astral vision, so he would be able to take a look at you and tell you that you have a headache or you have a liver problem just by looking at you and seeing your aura. He could do all of these things. Just an amazing person who was trained in occult mysticism. And so this little quote, it bears repeating from an essay he wrote called Vegetarianism and Occultism, where he's defining what the word occult means. Defining the occult. The word is derived from the Latin occultus, hidden, so that it is the study of the hidden laws of nature. Since all the great laws of nature are in fact working in the invisible world, far more than the visible, occultism involves the acceptance of a much wider view of nature than that which is ordinarily taken. The occultist, then, is a man who studies all the laws of nature that he can reach or of which he can hear. And as a result of his study, he identifies himself with these laws and devotes his life to the service of evolution. A beautiful paragraph. And on the bottom here, you see this spectrum that I've laid out, and just calling this spectrum the range of causality. And because as humans, and this is accepted in all scientific circles, we are only capable of seeing with our senses a fraction. It's like 0.0009% of the spectrum. It's really small. So with such a narrow window into the range of causality, into the range of the types of energetic influences that we could be subjected to, is it any wonder that we might be missing some causative agents when we assess health and wellness and disease and causative agents of disease, okay? This is one of the major stumbling blocks because, as we know, viruses and bacteria are simply means of cleansing the body of impurities. Now, what cripples our understanding is that the onboarding of impurities in the body can take has so many different manifestations, many of which we don't even recognize, okay? Many of which are just beyond our comprehension. Or just plain hidden, or just not even talked about. I'll give you an example. Look up in the sky at any given day. If you're anywhere in the world, you see chemtrails, right? Planes have been blasting the planet with horribly toxic, horribly poisonous chemtrails for decades now, right? If you're familiar with this topic and somehow you're still under the impression that these are just natural contrails, natural ejections, plane ejections. I'm sorry, you gotta hit a book. These are chemical trails that are sprayed deliberately in the atmosphere that are viciously toxic, viciously poisonous. But of course, nobody talks about this. And the crap is still going on to this day. Now, if you think that this doesn't have anything to do with disease, especially when it's blanketing entire nations, well, yeah, you might have entire nations poisoned by something that is poisoning the atmosphere. But then, of course, when everybody gets sick, right, nobody recognizes the poisoning that's happening up above. So they say, oh, I got sick because of my neighbor. No, you didn't get sick because of your neighbor. You got sick because the whole goddamn planet's being poisoned by toxins, by lunatics and psychopaths and friggin' order followers in military outfits who are not just spraying indiscriminately, not asking questions. So yeah, sorry, I'm a bit frustrating. That's a problem. Okay, I think what's going to happen is we're going to split this up into 2 parts because this is going to be a longer lecture. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut it there, and we're going to give you the next section after this first part is absorbed. Okay, thanks so much for checking this out, guys. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed already, and make sure not to miss part 2 of this presentation. All right, peace and love, everyone.